Dave Knows How.
Welcome back to my channel. In this video we're doing a little follow-up video to the third function valve, and I think this is video 11, I think, or 12, I don't know. I've lost count. This thing has just gone on for so long. But one of the things that I wanted to address in this video is about the double piloted load locking valve. Okay, and I wasn't 100% sure how this locking valve was going to work in regards to where I installed it in the hydraulic circuit for a front end attachment. Now right now we've got a grapple on the front of the tractor, and we're going to go over some things that are the good and the bad of having the locking valve plumbed into the tractor circuit as it is. It would be ideally better to have the locking valve mounted on whatever implement you had on the front, whether that be a grapple or a 4-in-1 bucket. Have the locking valve on that unit and plumbed into it, and then lines coming out of it to be connected into your tractor hydraulics. I didn't do it that way. I've actually got my quick connects on the other side of the locking valve, so my front implement plugs into the locking valve. So this causes a problem, and that problem is if there's nothing hooked up to the front of the tractor, like if you just got a regular bucket on here and you hit the button on your third function valve and apply fluid pressure to this locking valve, it will hold pressure in there, and the only way to release that pressure is to push the pin in on the quick coupler. When that happens, because there's no way to release that pressure. I mean, on a conventional system, what you would do is you would turn the ignition, you would turn the tractor off, turn the ignition switch on, and then you would press your control on your third function valve. That would open the valve and release the pressure so you could plug your hoses in. Since we have a locking valve, it works a little bit differently, and so if you turning the tractor off and turning the switch on and hitting that button still opens the third function valve, but it will not release the pressure on the pressure side of the locking valve, because it requires pressure to open that part of the valve up. So you end up with fluid locked in there in a high pressure state, which can make it difficult to plug in your implement into the system. So to take care of that, I've got a piece of brass rod. It's not huge. It's probably about 1/2 inch diameter round stock. It's about 6 inches long, and I use whatever I've got that can beat on it, a hammer or a piece of steel, adjustable wrench, anything, and I'll stick it up inside there and just gently tap it, a firm tap, and it will push that ball in and the pressure will release, and then I can go ahead and hook it up. Now, that's only a problem so far. That seems to be only a problem if we don't have anything hooked up on the front and we push that button and open the third function valve and put pressure here. If we go ahead right now and disconnect these lines and then hook them back up, they'll hook right back up just fine. We can unhook these lines, take this off, set it aside, get a 4-in-1 bucket, put it on, hook it back up, it'll hook right back up just fine, because there's no high pressure in there, because when you disconnect these lines, it releases the pressure. So as long as you don't push that button up there with nothing hooked to it, you're fine. So that's the negative, and that's not that big of a deal to be a negative, because you know, even with a 4-in-1 bucket or a grapple or something like that, if you've got it off the tractor and it's sitting in the sun can heat the fluid up, the fluid can expand, and it can actually get so much pressure that you can't plug it in. And when that happens, you know, you need to take the end of that quick coupler and push that little ball in, or whatever type of system you have. Some of them are flat face couplings. You have to push that flat face in. So I typically like to use a soft hammer, or you know, either like a nylon hammer, soft hammer, or a piece of brass or something like that that's soft to do that with. So that's something that you kind of got to get used to doing, because you will run into that problem, especially if you have implements off of your tractor and it's getting heated up by the sun. You can run into those types of problems. So anyway, enough talk about the negative. Let's talk about the positive. And this is really exciting because there was a discussion over on one of the tractor groups on Facebook, and the question arose by one of the members over there, and forgive me for not remembering the name of the person who brought the question up. I could probably go in there and find it and tell you what his name is, but there's no excuse. It's pure laziness on my part for not going in there and getting your name. You'll just have to bear with me. There's been a lot going on around here, and just trying to get through the video. So anyway, the discussion was about the third function valve. The gentleman had put a third function valve on his tractor, and then he had purchased a grapple, a 4-in-1 bucket or something. And when he went to use the grapple and open it and close it, he noticed that anytime he was opening or closing his grapple, he was unable to curl or dump his bucket, or raise or lift his bucket. He couldn't do any of them functions as long as he had the button pushed in for the third function valve to open and close this grapple. The good news is this locking valve has fixed that problem, that, if you want to call it a problem, if you want to call it a flaw. It has fixed that, because the way this locking valve works, it's a double polleted locking valve. The pollet stands for 2 switches. So your hydraulic fluid goes in and it pushes down on 2 switches. And that allows fluid to flow in one direction and flow out the other direction. And until it pushes in them 2 switches, fluid can't flow. Well, it takes pressure to push those 2 buttons in. And because it's taking pressure to do that, it's creating back pressure on the system. And so with this tractor, with that locking valve in place, I can open and close this grapple while I dump and curl on the machine, and lift and lower on the machine, all at the same time. And you know, that's great news, you know. So and my theory on why this is possible is due to the back pressure created by the double polleted locking valve. Is that the actual reason? Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. It's just a theory that I have, and you know, I didn't want to tell the theory in my previous video when I was talking about adding this in, because I wasn't sure how my theory was going to play out. I didn't know what kind of problems was going to arise with this locking valve. I had a feeling that with the locking valve, if I pushed the button and nothing was hooked to it, it was going to create a locking situation, a hydro lock situation where I couldn't plug the hose in. I kind of figured that, but I wasn't 100% sure. Now I'm 100% sure it will cause that problem. It's not a big deal to overcome. Number one, don't push the button if you don't have something hooked into it. You shouldn't be pushing the button anyway. And that was the reason why in my video series you'll see that I actually added in a switch at the top of the tractor station, up at the main tractor station, where I can cut off the entire circuit for the third function valve. So if there's no grapple, no 4-in-1 bucket on the front of this machine, I can cut that switch off, and if anybody gets up on there playing with them buttons, or if I accidentally hit the button, it's not going to send fluid down here and create that hydro lock situation. So that was the purpose of putting that switch up there. Don't have to worry about kids getting up there, pushing the button, run the battery down, all this kind of crazy mess. So anyway, I'm really excited that it worked out. That you know, I was right about that. I had no idea that putting the valve on there was going to create enough back pressure that I would be able to use the third function valve to open and close an implement, as well as be able to use the curl and dump function and a raise and lower function all at the same time. Now, a lot of you guys are probably saying, prove it. We want to see it. Okay, that's what we're going to do next. We're going to fire up a tractor. We're going to show you what I'm talking about. We're going to open and close this grapple while we're raising and lowering and tilting and dumping the bucket. Let's get on it. All right, so there you go. As you've seen, it'll open and close when you're going up and down, or when you tilt or curl and dump the bucket. Is it because of the locking valve? I don't know. I can only speculate that that's what's helping it to be able to do that. Certain situation gets in, it can be a little bit jumpy, depending on how much you feather the loader control, but it definitely does work. It was one of the first things I took notice to when I put the grapple on there, was that it does open and close while you're operating the other functions on the bucket.
Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.